When we moved into this house, I knew the kitchen would be my first project. The countertops were Formica and they were badly stained. I wasn't crazy about the wooden cupboards and there wasn't a backsplash. Since the kitchen is the heart of the home, as they say, that's where I wanted to start. Hi, I'm Alicia. I'm a DIY enthusiast who's tackled everything from crafting to curb appeal across 11 homes. This one's forever. Follow along as I transform my house into my forever home, sharing my best DIY tips and tricks along the way to help you create yours too. So let's get started. Back to the cabinet boxes, I rolled on 2 coats of cabinet paint using a foam roller for a smooth finish. Using painter's tape to tape off the appliances was a lot easier than removing them. The doors were in great shape and only needed a light sanding. After the sanding was done, I wiped each down with plain water. I used a cabinet paint and the foam roller to paint the front and back of each door, and used a brush to get into the nooks and crannies. I ended up applying 4 coats of paint. Next was the kitchen island. We removed the top and the drawers and the doors. Here's a tip. When you remove the hardware, keep it all together in a labeled bowl or plastic bag. I wanted the island to look like its own piece of furniture, and the easiest way to do that was with beadboard. After measuring everything out, I tried to use my small circular saw to cut it, but it really ripped up the board. So I ended up using my trusty jigsaw. It was easy cutting from then on. Did you notice the top of my work table? Yep, that's the top of the island that we removed. It's sitting on a cupboard that I ripped out of house number 9 when we renovated that kitchen. After the beadboard was cut, I added adhesive first and then nailed the board to the island. I didn't need a lot of adhesive, but it gave me assurance that the beadboard wouldn't fall off. Now to paint. I could have painted the beadboard before I put it onto the island, but then I would have to go back and fill the nail holes and touch up the paint, so this was just easier. Sanding the island doors was very quick and easy, just like the cabinet doors. Here's a tip. Line your painter's pan with aluminum foil for easy cleanup. I painted the island a darker shade than the cupboard to give it a nice contrast. A butcher block countertop was surprisingly less expensive than I thought, and I could install it myself. I finished it off with tiny decorative corner molding. I used another favorite tool, a miter trim cutter. This is so handy and a good tool to have in your toolbox. I purchased butcher block sealer and applied according to manufacturer's directions. I love the way it brought out the wood grain. I reattached the freshly painted doors and drawers. Then, using a cabinet hardware jig, I made the holes and inserted the simple knobs. My husband and I removed the rest of the old countertops, but had the new ones professionally installed, along with a deep stainless steel sink and faucet. Now that the countertops were in, it was time for the backsplash. Using an adhesive tile mat made it a lot easier than applying thin set to the walls. I'd like to give a shout out for laser levels. Whoever invented this tool was a genius. I lined up the tile. The first one is the most important, so that took the most time. And then I was off to the races. One dumb thing I did was to put up all the tile on one wall and then went to bed thinking I'd work on it the next day. Well, the adhesive tile mat is sticky, but when I came down the next morning, half the tile had fallen off the wall. So, pro tip, grout as you go. Another good DIY tool to have in your toolbox is a tile cutter. You can buy one for around $100 and they're not as scary as using a wet saw. So here's another confession. I have tiled before and I'm not sure why it looks like I don't know what I'm doing. You shouldn't use a metal cutting knife to apply mortar. Luckily, it didn't scratch the tile. Tiles up, so on to the floating shelves. I marked the studs using painter's tape, drilled the holes, and installed the metal brackets. For the shelves, I wanted them wide, so I used stair treads. I cut them to size and stained them early American. I applied finishing paste, which wasn't going on as smoothly as I wanted, So I used my paint edge tool and an old rubber scraper to apply the wax. That works great. Shelves are up and installed. So, do you remember the before? This is my kitchen now. It's open and much brighter after adding the shelving. I love the backsplash that extends all the way up to the ceiling and the butcher block island. OMG. Next, we're heading upstairs to give the primary bedroom the refresh it deserves. This room was just a giant blank builder grade space, so I knew I had to give it some personality, make it cozier, and a place that I wanted to spend time in. I began by painting the walls a soft, creamy color. Because the room is so big, I didn't want to choose a bold color that would have overpowered the room, and white is just too stark for me. I wanted something dramatic behind the bed, and I drew out an idea that I had, and then traced where the bed and the nightstands would be. This would help me to align everything. I measured the walls and marked out 6-inch cuts on the MDF. I don't have a table saw, so my Kreg jig is one of my favorite tools. I put up the first board using a laser level and added adhesive and screwed the boards into place. I then added the bottom board and then pieced together the ends of the top and the bottom. Next, I added my 3-inch vertical MDF boards, making sure the spacing between each board was 12 inches. I countersunk and spackled all the holes. I then added quarter round just to finish the top. Once that was on, I cut the boards for the angled ceiling and put them into place using the same method as I'd used before. While everything dried on the wall, I painted the doors and the trim. Now to paint my feature wall. I chose a dark, rich green. The creamy paint I chose for the other walls really will make this wall pop. Man, don't you wish you could paint this fast in real life? I've always wanted a window seat, and the nook in this room is perfect. But first, before I began that build, I needed to clear the space of this outdated chandelier. Not only do I not like the look of it, but it's also blocking my view of the window. With all my years of DIY, I am confident in tackling a lighting swap. I just unscrewed the base, snipped the wires, and swapped out a new, more modern fixture. I removed the baseboards so it would be flush against the wall. I made the frames using 2x4s and used my Kreg pocket hole jig, screwed the frame together. I attached the frame to the wall and built up the seat so it would be flush with the windowsill. I then covered the front with beadboard and cut MDF for the tops. I wanted the middle lower than the sides, so those were also trimmed out with beadboard. Then the entire seat was trimmed by quarter round and caulked. Now for the paint. I used the same color as the feature wall to paint the window seat. Next, the large half-round windows needed something. They had blown their seal and it was too costly to replace them. Window film was my answer. After measuring the windows, I cut out a template and used that to cut the film to the approximate size of the window. I smoothed it on using wallpaper smoother to get all the air bubbles out and then cut it to fit in the window exactly. This project was very labor intensive, but 100% worth it. I wanted more room on my bedside table, so I added sconces to each side of the bed on the wall. Now the fun part, decorating. Adding beautiful pictures, plush cushions, and treasured items that I found and mementos that have been given to me make this room very special now. So, do you remember my boring white box of a bedroom? I added curtains to the windows, blankets and pillows to cozy up the space even more. Yeah, I love this room now. I love the rich green color of the accent wall. And the window seat of my dreams, I have a pile of books to be read in there. So now you've seen my kitchen makeover and my bedroom. Next, we're tackling the entryway, and wait till you see what I do by the front door. The walls are white, the wood floor was scratched and damaged in some places, and the stairs, there are no words for those plastic treads and brown paint. After removing the metal stair nose molding, I pulled up the plastic treads. Yes, they were glued down, so I knew I wasn't going to be refinishing the steps. Tackling the wood flooring was another job that was harder than I thought. I removed the vent and the door molding. As I started to remove the wood flooring, I realized every single board had been nailed down in several places. I know many people will be horrified that I removed a solid wooden floor, but it was damaged in some places and really aged the house. I did take the undamaged pieces to my local Habitat restore so somebody else could use it in their home. Back to the stairs, I realized the bottom 5 steps were oak, so I knew I had to do something. I couldn't cover them up. So I stripped off the brown paint 6 inches on each side of each step, and then I sanded. Next, I taped off each step and painted the risers black, but only 6 inches in, which saved a ton of time and paint. Then I used the same black cabinet paint to freshen up the banisters and newel posts. Yes, I used cabinet paint on the stairs for its durability. Next, it was time to stain the stairs in Early American. So much better and really brings out the beautiful grain in the wood. On to the white walls. I wanted to add something to the walls, so I decided on a board and batten. After measuring and leveling everything off, I cut MDF with my trusty Craig jig. I nailed the vertical board onto the wall, and once I got going, it was off to the races. Don't I wish? Once the MDF was up, I painted the top third of the wall a soft green. Thankfully, I can paint at the speed of sound, so it didn't take that long. While the paint dried, I cut and added my horizontal boards and added trim underneath. Then I added a 1x2 to the top to form a ledge. That's a lot of adding, but wow, what a difference. I ran a bead of Tight Bond Pro Grade Plus caulk along all the seams. Here's a pro tip: wet your finger to smooth out your caulk. For the board and batten, I chose to paint it a darker green. I believe it was called pea soup, and yes, it was exactly what it looked like. Yum. Well, we're in the home stretch now. I'm going to tile the floor, so I had to lay down a membrane first. Once I was down, I could begin tiling. I've always loved penny tile and thought it was so cool when stores would have their names spelled out in the tile, but I didn't want to spell out our name, so I chose the word welcome instead. This was a process figuring out where the pieces would fit, kind of like a puzzle. Once welcome was spelled out, it could go onto the floor. I will also admit, as I started to lay it down, I realized it was upside down, so I had to start again, but no problem. This was very, very time consuming, but just you wait. Tiles down, now it's time to grout. I also love black and white square tile. My husband helped me snap a chalk line to give me a straight edge down the middle of the hall. I mixed my thin set, then it was tile time. I applied thin set as I laid each tile. While this is a slower process, it ensures your thin set won't dry before you lay down your tile. I also used a long level to keep my tile edges straight. 24 hours later, the thin set was dry. I applied the grout using the plastic smoother, then pushed it between each tile using a tile float. I worked on a few rows, then stopped to wipe the tiles clean of the grout. Here's a pro tip: use a smaller bucket and cut your big sponge in half. You don't need a lot of water in your bucket, but you will have to change your water often. You won't be able to perfectly clean the tile while the grout is wet, but make sure there are no lumps of grout on the tile. I had to install a transition strip from my tile to my LVF, and I chose one that matched the flooring. I just measured and cut it to length, then snapped it into place. Back to the stairs. I laid padding first, stapling it into place, and then a new carpet runner, which was really easy to install. Nailed it in easy peasy, and oh, what a difference. One more thing, a barn door. Our laundry room between our garage and our entryway. The door swings out and was always blocking the entry, so I needed a solution. We had to have a door there, and a barn door wasn't that hard to install. I needed to put up a header board because the 1x2 that I put on the board and batten stuck away from the wall. I cut a 1x4 to fit the door track. The door I purchased was white, so I painted it pea soup using my Little Giant scaffolding and 2 Little Giant ladders. I didn't tape off the glass when I painted because scraping the paint off the glass with a razor blade is very satisfying to me. Once the paint was dry, I added the hanging brackets. My husband and I moved the door into place so I could ensure the metal door track was hung at the correct height. I attached the track, put the door onto the track, and voila, so much better. So what do you think of my entryway now? The plain white walls are gone, the damaged wood floor is gone, the word for the steps, oh wow, so beautiful. I keep my front door open all the time, so if somebody is walking by our house, they can see how cool it looks. So now you've seen my kitchen makeover, my primary bedroom makeover, and the entryway. Next, I'm tackling the bathroom. It was a blank slate with outdated fixtures, linoleum flooring, and no personality. I began by taking the doors off of the vanity. These are solid wood, and the vanity was still in great shape. Next, I removed the towel bars. Our first tip in this room, instead of trying to remove plastic anchors, use a screwdriver and push them into the wall. That way you'll have a smooth surface to spackle. The handles on the vanity were outdated, so I removed them and filled just one of the holes with wood filler. A light sanding and wipe down, and the doors are ready for paint. I used the same black cabinet paint that I used in my stairs and spindles in the entryway. I'm going to be tiling the floor, so I have to remove the toilet. After turning off the water, I flushed the toilet, then removed the tank water using a cloth and a bucket. Once the water was removed, I unscrewed the tank and disconnected the water line, and then removed the toilet. Onto the floor. By sanding the linoleum, I don't have to put down a membrane. After cleaning the floor, I measured and found the center of my floor. Working from the center towards the toilet area, I began to lay the tile. I used the same tile that I used in the entranceway. Why? I had tile left over. I love black and white tile, and it gives the house a cohesive look. Next, I painted the walls a bright golden color, which matched the wallpaper I was planning to use. After taking a step back and looking at that bright gold paint, I realized I really hated it, so I started over. I primed the walls. Then I chose a soft blue called Sky Rider by Sherwin-Williams. By priming over the deep gold color, the soft blue went on beautifully. After painting, with help from my husband, I removed the mirror. Pro tip: add painter's tape to the mirror in case you drop it. That way it won't shatter into a million little pieces. After removing the mirror, it was time to replace the light fixtures. I removed the old ones, capping off the wires for now. Using my Little Giant ladder, it was easy to be at the right height to hang my new wallpaper. I picked a different wallpaper than I had before so that this one would go with the blue paint. It was peel and stick, which I had never used before, and it was really easy. And the hardest part was matching the design. Here's another pro tip. Use a large putty knife along with a utility knife for a nice clean edge. Just move the putty knife along as you cut. Now to hang the new light fixtures. I chose a schoolhouse light as we have them throughout our home. I painted the vanity black using the same cabinet paint I used on the stairs. New black faucets were easy to install. The vanity needed fresh caulk, so I used Tite Bond Pro Grade caulk. With a wet paper towel, cleanup was easy. I caulked the entire vanity, including around the drain. Now to grout the floor. My dog Gus and I used premix grout, which makes the job so easy. I just applied it with a plastic putty knife, pushed the grout into the seams using a float, and cleaned as I went. I chose a 3-peg towel hook, checking for height by hanging a towel before putting them onto the wall. We're in the home stretch now. Mirrors are next. I decided on 2 separate mirrors instead of one big one. They came with French cleats to hang the mirror onto the wall. I had to use anchors as there weren't studs where I wanted to hang them. I chose brushed gold edge mirrors for another color other than black. Time to put the doors on the vanity. I reused the hinges and replaced the handles with brushed gold knobs. I caulked the toilet using Tite Bond Pro Grade caulk. Here's a tip: if you don't use an entire tube of caulk, put an eye hook screw into the opening. It will keep your caulk fresh and it's easy to remove. So here it is. I love the blue so much. It's so fresh and light. The wallpaper behind the vanity really ties the black and white floor together with the walls. I added white and black towels and a black and white shower curtain. I even found a blue soap dispenser and toothbrush holder. I've been making this house my forever home, one room at a time. Let's look back at the transformation so far, and I'll answer a few of your questions along the way. The first room I tackled was the kitchen. I chose to begin there because you can see the kitchen from the front door, and I didn't want people to come into our house and see the outdated kitchen. Besides, we use the kitchen a lot, so it made sense to start there. You asked questions in the comments of my makeovers, and I'd love to answer some of them. So you asked, were these laminate or wood cabinets? So my doors are solid wood, but the cabinet boxes themselves are laminate. I would prime before painting to ensure that the paint's durability, and always buy paint specifically made for cabinets. Another question was, may I ask which paint brand you use for your cabinets? I always use Sherwin-Williams paint. It does cost more, but the coverage and durability is worth it. Now, Lowe's does carry Sherwin-Williams that's less expensive than purchasing it directly from the Sherwin-Williams store. And as I said before, you can really use any brand that you want. Another question was, what were the countertops made out of? Our countertops were Corian, color was sorrel, and we got them from the Home Depot. Another question asked was, do you have paint colors and backsplash tile recommendations? I chose my colors because the kitchen is in the same open area as our family room, which has a gray stone fireplace. Our flooring, which was already in the house, is also a gray toned faux wood, so I needed to tie them all together. I would start with a tile and find a few that you really love. Bring home samples and see what looks good, and then pick your paint colors off the tiles. So the second room I decided to do was our master bedroom. This room is massive, and when we bought the house, it looked like a big white box and had no personality. So some questions that you asked: where can I find a list of colors of paint that you use for each project? Okay, I only use Sherwin-Williams paint. So the colors that I used in the kitchen, the cabinets were painted lazy gray, and the island was painted bachelor pad. In the bedroom, the walls were paper white, and the bench and feature wall was succulent. In the entryway, the top of the wall was river reed, and the bottom was pea soup. And in the bathroom, that beautiful blue was Skywriter. For even more links to products I used in my makeovers, see the link in the description below. The third room I decided to do was the entryway, because like the kitchen, it's the first thing you see when you come into our home. So some of the questions about the entryway, the first one was, why in the world wouldn't you do the whole stair? Well, the glue on the treads was so thick and it was very, very difficult to remove. And I was adding a runner, so it didn't matter what it looked like underneath the carpet. Another question was, How did you decide this would be your forever home? I lived in Pennsylvania my whole life, but about 4 years ago, we moved to the coast of Georgia to escape the cold Pennsylvania winters. In October of 2024, my first grandchild was born in Pennsylvania, and I didn't want to miss his life. So we decided to move back to Pennsylvania. I truly do love this home, and I'm really tired of moving. And by the way, I'm 62. Love the green. How long did it take you to complete your project? The entryway was the longest of all the projects, and it took me about 2 months, only because I also work part-time. So the next room that I did was the bathroom. This room was very outdated and just needed some love. So we received a lot of comments from people, and they said they wish they could do these projects. You absolutely can do these projects. My recommendation would be to start small. If you've never done something, just start small. Paint a wall. As long as you have the right tools, the projects will go smoothly. And watch a lot of YouTube videos if you don't know how to do something. Another question, where did you get your love for DIY? Well, my mother taught my sisters and me to never rely on a man to get the job done. So I guess that's where it started. I also learned a lot from a gentleman who was a carpenter, just watching him fix things. A lot was and is still trial and error. I just love knowing that I have the skill and can pass it down to whoever wants to learn. Another question, what is your favorite room to make over? I really don't have a favorite room. I just love doing it. I love the before and afters and how simply just painting the walls can change everything. Another question, this turned out so great. Love the wallpaper. Do you have a link you can share? The wallpaper that I put up was a peel and stick, and I bought that at Lowe's. But I do love to wallpaper. So I also use spoon flour or wall blush. They both have great selection, and their shipping is really quick. What are your most used tools? I'm just getting started on my DIY toolbox. So my recommendation would be to pick a brand that is battery operated and then use only that from that collection to grow your toolbox. That way you can use each tool with the same battery. I use Ryobi. I love their tools. They're very durable and they have a huge selection. The last question, what is one DIY you'd like to do over again? None of them. I've learned from every project that I've done over my 40 plus years. None of the projects are perfect because I'm not a professional, but when I look at them, I know that I did it myself. Now that you've seen my kitchen, my bedroom, my entryway, and my bathroom, it's time to work on the front of the house. I can't wait to boost my curb appeal and finally truly make this my forever home. My house looks a lot like all the houses in my neighborhood, with the rounded porch columns and lamp post, the vinyl porch railing, the solid front door. The shutters on the side of the house were faded, and the garage door also needed a refresh. I began by removing the vinyl porch railing. I tried to figure out how to remove it without cutting it, but in the end I used my trusty oscillating saw and cut the caps that attached it to the posts. Once the top rail was removed, the spindles popped out. I cut the bottom rail off the same way as the top. I had 4 sets to remove, which took about an hour. Onto the garage. After wiping down the door, I decided to paint it a deep gray to match the shutters. The color is Winchester gray. And using the little giant ladder made it easy to reach the top of the door to roll on the paint using a foam roller and brush. While I waited for the first coat on the garage door to dry, I painted the man door the same dark gray. Did you know that's what this door is called? A man door. I don't know why. While the door dried, I refreshed the trim with white paint. After the door dried, I replaced the old gold doorknob with a new matte black one. We also decided to replace the old key lock with a Yale keypad lock. With my husband's help, installing the lock was really easy. Everything was included along with easy to understand step-by-step instructions. After the installation, we popped in the batteries and we were ready to download Yale's app and set up the lock for remote access. We never really used this door before, but now it's simple to just press in our code and unlock the door. Next was painting the faded shutters. Instead of climbing up the outside of the house on a 12-foot extension ladder, I could easily remove the shutters from inside using my lightweight little giant ladder. They were so dirty and faded after years of hanging on the sunny side of our house. I gave each one a good scrub using soap and water, then it was time to paint. This time I used Valspar paint in City Storm. Why? This paint was formulated for plastic, which is what my shutters are made out of. I had a color match to the other gray paint, the Westchester gray. After the shutters dried, I hung them back up. They looked so much better. Before I tackled the rest of the projects, I power washed the front of the house. It's funny how your house doesn't look dirty until you get out the power washer, and then you realize just how gross your house is. Next project, window boxes. I wanted to make them out of pressure-treated lumber. And if you didn't know, you should never plant directly into pressure-treated lumber because whatever it's treated with will leach into your potting soil. So using a liner, I measured and cut my wood using my miter saw. I used my Craig pocket hole jig to drill holes into the boards. I used wood glue to put the pieces together, then clamped them and screwed them together. I used wood glue on each end, then nailed them just to hold the sides in place. Using thin finishing screws, I screwed each box together. For the bottom, I decided to attach chicken wire instead of wood. This would help with drainage and make the box a little lighter. It already had a weight to it, and once I added flowers and soil, I knew it would be very heavy. I cut the chicken wire to fit, then attached it with staples. This was a process since the chicken wire has to be tight so the liner doesn't hang lower than the box. The liner fit, and it looks good. To hang the boxes, I used pressure-treated lumber to hold the brackets onto my house. This helped level them as my siding was at an angle. The boxes were stained with English chestnut and sealed. Now to plant. I usually arrange my flowers in the box before I plant just to see how everything looks together. Once the boxes were dry and the liner was planted, they were easily hung up on the brackets. This looks so good. We decided mid-project to install a new hose, a hose link retractable hose. This hose needs to be mounted, so we installed a wooden post. We dug the hole and filled it with concrete. Once the concrete was dry, I stained and sealed it with English chestnut. To mount the hose, I used a template provided to attach the mounting bracket, then slip the hose housing into it. This hose is so great. It retracts into the housing with just a little tug. Now for the big project, wrapping my outdated porch columns. After a lot of research, the main consensus was to use cedar wood. Unfortunately, cedar is not in my budget, so I used pressure-treated lumber. My columns are a strange size, so I had to use one 6-inch board, then rip another board to entirely cover the column. Once I figured out what I was doing, I was rolling along. I will confess, one column did suffer the consequences of my miscalculations. But you'll never know. I attached the boards with liquid nails and nailed them to hold them in place. Because wood isn't straight, I used clamps to move the wood into alignment and secured them with finishing screws. The tops and bottoms were finished with 1x1s. This hid any uneven boards and gave it a nice finished look. On to the lamppost. I removed the old light fixture, making sure the power was turned off first. This post was thinner than the porch column, so I added scrap boards onto the post before attaching the outside boards so everything would line up. Then I nailed everything in place. For the top, I made a cap from leftover boards and 1x1s. I drilled a 1-inch hole in the center for the wires and mounted the new light fixture. Now to stain the porch columns with English chestnut. Using a foam roller and dry cloth, this went pretty quickly. Pro tip, always wear gloves when staining or your hands will be stained too. Once the porch columns were stained, I stained the light post. While the stain was drying, it was time to stain our new front door from Pease Doors. This beautiful mahogany door is a piece de resistance to my curb appeal. It brings so much light into the interior and is just gorgeous. We had it professionally installed along with a new handle and another Yale lock. I really took my time staining the door because it's so beautiful and I didn't want to mess it up. Once all my stain was dried on the columns, post, and door, everything was sealed. After the door was installed and stained, I knew I had to paint the white surround and side lights. I used Titebond Pro-Grade caulk to fill any cracks, then painted it Westchester gray, the same color as the garage and the man door. When we bought the house, the siding had some damage. I consulted YouTube on how to fix it and discovered Guppy Hill Vinyl Siding Repair Kit, which I bought on Amazon. You cut it to size, peel off the backing, and press it on. Then I painted the patch to match the siding. All this work made everyone thirsty, so I gave my plants a drink using my HoseLink retractable hose. So easy to use and looks so good. Adding magnetic faux hinges to the garage door was the final touch to finish that project. Do you remember my house before? Now look at her. She looks so fresh and new. With the wooden wrap columns, light post, and matching window boxes, that gorgeous Pease door mahogany door, her garage doors and shutters painted to match the rest of the house, she's so proud to be a standout in the neighborhood. So now you've seen my kitchen makeover, my primary bedroom, the entryway, the bathroom, and now the front of my house. Room by room, I've made this house my forever home.
I had this very cluttered and boring pantry closet. I cleaned out the closet, removed the shelves. I then grabbed some very colorful 12 by 12 inch vinyl tiles. Once I cut it, I simply peeled off the backing that comes on the tile and exposed the adhesive. I also used some painter's tape just to hold everything together. I used a little piece of painter's tape to mark where the hole was so that it would make it easier for me to reattach the clips later. I put the wire shelving back in place. I will admit, it did make me notice how dingy my wire shelving was. I purchased some sheets of plywood from the hardware store. I cut my plywood to the size of the shelving. I just added the plywood on top of the 1x3, and I used a nail gun to secure it in place. Once I had them all in, they looked great, but I definitely wanted to stain them to make them a little bit of a darker, richer color. The problem, for me, I really wanted it to look a lot lighter and brighter. I cleaned the cabinets thoroughly. I removed the cabinet pulls and then took the doors off of the hinges. This allowed me to paint the cabinets and the cabinet boxes. I painted them white and the process was very quick and easy. Once I applied a few coats and allowed that to dry, I put the cabinets back in place. I wanted to personalize the pulls a bit and I did so using some jute string. After that, it was time for me to work on the dark granite countertop. This project started with cleaning, lightly sanding, and then re-cleaning the counters. Next, I applied white paint from a marbling kit to the countertops. I applied a second coat, which covered a bit more. I applied a third coat as well. I painted on the lines using the gray paint that came in the kit. Then I softened those lines. After I got those looking the way I wanted them to, I added the epoxy on top. I purchased a silver peel and stick online. I wrapped the black dishwasher. Before you spend money on expensive tile, check out this $100 idea. I used shiplap and cut it to size the length of my kitchen wall, and then I painted it using a paint sprayer. I placed my first piece in the kitchen and I made sure to mark where the outlets were. I needed to cut just the little tongue part of the shiplap to make sure that it would not go over the outlet area. I did this using a tool called a multi-tool. It worked well for me and was really quick. I simply placed the shiplap in place and secured it using a nail gun. I continued this way up the wall. It took me 4 pieces of shiplap to get to the top of the backsplash and fit right underneath the cabinet. After that, I put my new appliances in and added little trim pieces to the edges to give my project a finished look. After updating this 1980s kitchen, I knew it needed something more. So I decided to use an adhesive tile mat, along with mosaic tile sheets, white grout, and a sponge. The adhesive mat comes on a roll. When it came to the outlets, I made sure the power was off, and I simply cut the mat with a razor blade so that I could create an opening around the outlet and disposal switch area. When I was ready to place the tile, I removed the white cover sheet. You can use spacers when installing the tile sheets, but I felt comfortable working without them. The work progressed pretty easily, and I was lucky that, at the first corner, the tiles ended in just the right spot. When I got to the second corner, I wasn't quite so fortunate. My husband was helping me out at the tile saw while I was doing the installation, and he went ahead and cut right down the tile mosaic sheet for me. When I got to the outlet and light switch area, I was able to press the tile into place just very lightly and then cut away the tile. I added the grout and then went over it with a damp sponge to get the grout residue off of the tile surface. I rinsed and repeated the cleaning with the damp sponge several times.
We started with a completely bare backsplash. Measure the length and height of each panel will need to be cut to. Now mark the panels to the correct size to be cut and cut them with the saw of your choice. I used a jigsaw and a table saw to make the cut. I found it easiest to lay the panels flat on the ground in a line as I cut them to make sure they lined up exactly. Next, you will need to take the panels in and mark where notches may need to be cut in order for the panels to fit under the cabinets. Take a tube of toothpaste and squirt a little on the corners of each outlet. Then slide your panels into place. Then remove them again and the toothpaste will have transferred to the back of the panel, showing where you need to cut the hole for the outlet. Now you're ready to set your panels in place. First, put construction adhesive on the back of the panels and then press them into place. Use a nail gun or panel nails to attach the panels into place. Now it's time for the faux finish. Sporadically paint the bricks various colors. I use white, tan, black, gray, and brown. Then use a wet rag to blend all the colors together. Lastly, spread the spackle on like a thin coat of icing.
So this is grout, like what you would use for towel. It's pre-mixed. Where the border would be on the brick, that's where you're going to put this stuff with your fingers.
Today's project starts with a few end tables that you can pick up from your local Walmart or IKEA, and they're simple to put together. Put a wheel on the bottom to make this table mobile. Get a nut that will fit on the end of those threads, and we've got to glue it to the bottom of the leg. But we want to make sure we add a washer to give it some strength, because we're going to use a 2-part epoxy. We're going to take the epoxy and put it around the edge of the bolt next to the washer, and on the bottom of our table, turn it on its side, and we've got to glue a piece of strip of wood on the bottom. Go ahead and just put some around the hole on the bottom of the leg, and we're going to take that little invention we did with the washer and the nut and stick it right on there. Make sure it gets nice and secure. That allows us now to screw the wheel into the bottom of the leg. Gotta join these 2 tables together. Once you get it all on there on all 4 corners, go ahead and stick the other table right on top. Once it dries up in about 20 minutes, it's super strong and it's time to paint it. Went ahead and put these 3 boards in for the base, and they sit there really nice. It also gives some strength, but it's time to finish the top. I want to use some contact paper.
I started with a pre-cut pine board that I bought from Lowe's that was about the same size as the stainless steel film that I bought on Amazon. The board was a little bit longer, but I measured and cut off 3 inches. I wanted the stainless steel to wrap around the edges of the board. For the legs, I measured and cut 1x3 and 1x4 inch pine boards to 32 3/4 inches. Using wood glue and brad nails, I completed 4 legs. For the shelves, I cut 1x3 inch pine, making 2 boxes, which I glued and nailed in place. I made 2 of these shelves. I attached the legs to the outside of the bottom shelf. Then I flipped it upside down and attached the top shelf the exact same way. For the bottom shelf, I measured and cut 9 1x4 inch pine and glued and nailed them into place. For the sides of the island, I added 1x3 inch pine cut to form the shape of a V, and I glued and nailed them on each side. For the feet, I cut squares out of 1x3 and then attached casters to those squares. They were glued and nailed in place on the bottom of each leg.
I laid the top in place and measured around to make sure that it was an equal distance. Then I nailed it in place. I carefully laid the film on top and smoothed it, pulling the film a little bit at a time and smoothing it into place. For the edges, I bent the film over the sides and stapled them in place. I folded the corners as you would wrap a gift and stapled those in place.
To start, you'll need 3 Parsons end tables, and I purchased mine at Walmart. I put 2 of the tables together. It was really easy. All you had to do was screw in the legs. For the third table, I didn't use the legs, and I drilled the holes just a little bit bigger so I could fit rolling wheels in them. Use some E6000 or glue of your choice and put it on the bottom of the legs on 2 of your tables. Stack your tables on top of the tabletop with the wheels.
I found this door on Facebook Marketplace and it was finally time to put it to use. The first step was to remove my existing bathroom door. After measuring my new door, I purchased a 1x8 to act as my header. We leveled it off and bolted it to 4 studs. Securing the track was easy as the barn door kit I ordered from Amazon came with everything I needed. After the track was hung, we drilled 4 holes into the top of the door, attached the hanging brackets, and secured them with the included bolts. To finish it off, I added some privacy cling film since this is a bathroom after all. This was super easy to use as it bonds to glass with just water.
Bathrooms can become disheveled and disorganized. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some of my top bathroom hacks. So first up, bar of soap gets very messy on the counter. So I'm going to take my soap dish and I'm going to fill it with some river rocks that I got at my local dollar store. Next up, I'm going to show you a cute way to dress up your toilet paper roll. So you're going to rip off 1 sheet and then 2 sheets that are attached together. And then you're going to take the end and you're going to just fold it into a triangle. So this is the very end piece that's still attached to our roll. And you can see here I've just folded it under. Then you're going to go ahead and you're going to just very gently poke 2 holes. And then you're going to go ahead and with the 1 square that you ripped off, you're just going to fold it into a little roll here. And then with the 2 pieces that are still attached together, you're going to fold them over each other and then you're going to use your fingers to pinch them down into the middle and you're going to make a bow shape. Then you're going to take the piece that you took off and rolled up and you're going to wrap it around to make a bow and you're just going to slide it through those 2 holes that you ripped into the toilet paper and then wrap it around the back. Another sore spot in the bathroom is hand towels. So I just fold the towel over 2 times and then I'm going to flip it over and then I'm going to fold it the other way vertically. So I'm going to take these ends and I'm just going to fold them into the middle on each side. And then once I've done that, I'm going to fold the towel in half. And then what you'll see here is that I have a neat little pocket here and then I can lay this over my towel rack. Now for my washcloth, I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to fold it in half and then I'm going to fold it accordion style, and then this is going to make a nice little fan that's going to sit in the pocket. If you want to roll your washcloths like they do at a spa, I'm going to show you how to do that now. So you start with a square washcloth and you grab 2 of the pointy ends and you fold them into the middle and then you flip it over and just fold it back 3/4 of the way and then begin to roll your washcloth. And then when you'll see here, you have a little pocket here that you can tuck the tail into and this holds them nice and tight.
When you are in the container aisle of the dollar store, pick up a couple of white wire shelves. Flip 1 shelf upside down and lay the second shelf on top, overlapping about 1/3 of the shelf. Now take some zip ties and connect the shelves together. Be sure to pull tight on the zip ties so the shelves are securely tied to each other. Remove the rubber tips from the ends of the shelves. Grab each arm on the shelves and bend them from their 90-degree angle to about a 45-degree angle. Next, give the entire shelf unit a coat of spray paint. This is the perfect shelf caddy for holding rolled up hand towels and washcloths. Grab a short glass container with a screw-on lid. Take a large marble and glue it to the center of the lid. Next, spray paint both the glass container and the screw-on lid. To style your new jar, take a small wood cutting board from the kitchen and use it as a tray to hold the jar and other beauty products. Head to the garden section, grab one of their metal French garden buckets. Give the entire bucket several light coats of overspray with some white spray paint. Take a black paint pen. Once you get a feel for how much pressure to apply, start to outline the bottom rim of the bucket with the paint pen. Let that dry, and then start to outline the lettering on the bucket. Once the letters have dried, outline the top rim of the bucket. Next, take some old drawer knobs and glue the knob to the bottom of the bucket. Style on a bathroom counter beside a sink by filling with hand soap and paper hand towels.